The charity gala at the Regal Crown Hotel was alive with music and laughter. Crystal chandeliers glowing above while the city's black elite gathered in shimmering gowns and tailored suits. And among them stood Malik Carter, 38 CEO of Carter Global Holdings, a company valued in the billions. His tall frame and sharp expression had earned him the nickname the Panther of Wall Street, whispered in financial magazines. Malik adjusted his cufflinks with a sigh, muttering to his assistant Jamal that nights like this were just another performance. Jamal chuckled, reminding him that his sister would never forgive him for skipping a fundraiser for children's education. Malik grunted, promising he would bid on something expensive and leave. Across the ballroom, Naomi Brooks, 29, adjusted the neckline of her second-hand navy dress, the only formal outfit she owned. As the struggling owner of a small bookstore in Harlem, she had no business in this glittering world of billionaires and politicians. She was only here because her best friend Tasha, who worked with the event organizers, had begged her to fill in as a server after someone called in sick. Naomi repeated Tasha's instructions in her head. Just smile, offer champagne, keep your head down. Balancing a tray of sparkling water, she moved through the crowd until she collided with a broad figure. The tray shook, appetizers flew, and Naomi gasped in horror, saying she was so sorry as she looked up into the cold, piercing eyes of Malik Carter. His gaze dropped to the stain on his expensive suit, and his voice came out calm but razor-sharp as he asked if she had any idea how much the jacket cost. Probably more than she made in a year, Naomi blurted before she could stop herself. And though a flicker of surprise crossed his face, the scowl quickly returned as he told her, "Maybe she should find another job." Naomi shot back, "Maybe you should watch where you're walking," and immediately regretted it, knowing she needed the money from this gig. And this was not the man to insult. Before Malik could respond, the host's voice echoed across the room, announcing that the final auction item tonight would be something unique. A dinner with one of the volunteers, with all proceeds going toward rebuilding libraries in underserved communities. Naomi froze, realizing this was not part of the plan, and turned in shock to see Tasha grinning and waving at her from the stage. The bidding started at $1,000 and the room fell uncomfortably silent until a deep voice from the back called, "10,000. Naomi's stomach dropped as Malik Carter stood with his paddle raised. His expression unreadable, but his eyes locked on her. Going once, going twice, sold to Mr. Carter. Applause filled the ballroom as Naomi's cheeks burned with humiliation and rage. Malik approached her, towering and calm, saying tomorrow night he would send a car. Naomi hissed that this was ridiculous and she hadn't agreed to it. Malik replied it was for the children with mock innocence and asked, unless she wanted to explain to everyone why she was backing out of a charity donation. Naomi glared at him, her voice tight with anger as she said fine, one dinner, but she wasn't for sale. Malik's smile was sharp as he answered that everyone had a price and he had simply found hers quickly. As he walked away, neither noticed Tasha's satisfied grin or Jamal's concerned frown, and neither of them knew that this one night would change everything. Naomi paced around her small Harlem apartment surrounded by stacks of books piled like fragile towers, romance novels, business guides, and classic literature forming narrow passageways through her living room. Her voice was filled with frustration as she told Tasha she couldn't believe she had done this to her. Tasha sat cross-legged on the couch, scrolling through, her phone looking unapologetic as she explained. The charity needed a big donation and Malik was loaded, and she never thought he would actually bid, because he never participated in these things. Naomi dropped into her reading chair, disturbing her orange tabby. Baldwin, who gave her an indignant look before jumping down. Naomi groaned that now she had to spend an entire evening with the most arrogant man in New York, when she had inventory to finish at the store since they were planning a sale that might keep Brooks' pages alive. Tasha's tone softened as she reminded Naomi this was exactly why she should go, make a connection with a billionaire. Maybe he would even support her bookstore. Naomi laughed bitterly, insisting Malik Carter didn't strike her as the type who read anything besides contracts and stock reports. Just then, Naomi's phone chimed with a text from an unknown number that read, "A car will pick you up at 7 p.m. Wear something appropriate, signed MC." Naomi fumed, repeating the word appropriate. What did that even mean? Tasha laughed, saying it meant she couldn't wear her Harry Potter sweater, and rushed to their shared closet, pulling out her elegant black dress, telling Naomi to think of it as armor. Naomi argued she wasn't trying to impress him, but Tasha reminded her she also didn't need to give him another reason to look down on her. By 6:58, Naomi stood outside her apartment building wearing Tasha's dress with her hair pinned into a neat updo. Right on time, a sleek black town car pulled up, and an older gentleman with kind eyes stepped out introducing himself as Frank. "Mr. Carter's driver," Naomi muttered. Of course he didn't come himself as she climbed inside. To her surprise, the car didn't head toward any restaurant she knew, but instead to a gleaming glass tower in Midtown, the headquarters of Carter Global Holdings. Frank led her into a private elevator that carried her to the top floor where the doors opened into a stunning penthouse, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. Malik stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear as he delivered sharp orders to someone overseas. His voice firm, saying he didn't care what Tokyo thought and the deal needed to be closed by morning, or they should find another job. He hung up and turned to face her, his eyes briefly flickering with surprise at her appearance before hardening again into indifference. "Miss Brooks, punctual, unexpected," he said coolly. Naomi crossed her arms, replying with equal coolness. "Mr. Carter, a dinner at your apartment, isn't that inappropriate?" Malik's mouth curved slightly as he asked if she was worried for her safety, and assured her her virtue wasn't in danger, because he didn't mix business with pleasure. Naomi asked, "And which am I, business or pleasure?" And he replied neither. She was his charity. Naomi's cheeks burned with anger as he gestured to the elegant dining table where food was laid out, and said he had a proposal to discuss. Reluctantly, she sat down as he poured water into crystal glasses, and explained his board of directors thought his ruthless image was hurting his brand, and they wanted him to appear more approachable. Naomi frowned, asking what that had to do with her, and he replied that he needed a fiancé. Temporarily, for 1 month, just for public appearances, and he would pay her $250,000. Naomi nearly choked and repeated incredulously that he wanted to buy a fake fiancé. Malik calmly corrected her, saying he wanted to hire an actress for a role, and she had already shown she could stand up to him, which was refreshing since most people were too intimidated. Naomi scoffed, but Malik continued as if she hadn't spoken, telling her he knew about her failing bookstore because Jamal had looked into it, and she was 3 months behind on rent. Naomi's eyes narrowed, accusing him of investigating her, but he cut in, saying it was smart business since he never entered an arrangement without doing his research. Naomi stood and threw her napkin on the table, declaring she was not for sale, not for 1 night, and certainly not for 1 month, and that he could find someone else to play his games. She turned to leave, but Malik's voice followed her, reminding her that the money could save her store, and wasn't that worth a month of pretending? Naomi paused at the elevator, her back still to him, thinking of the place where kids came for story time and her dreams slipping away. She turned slowly and said, $300,000, and he would make a real donation to the charity. Books, not just money. Malik studied her with unreadable eyes, then a rare smile flickered across his lips as he said, "Done." Jamal would draft the contract tomorrow and they would begin that weekend. As the elevator doors closed, Naomi leaned against the wall, wondering what she had just agreed to, while Malik turned back to the window, unsettled by the bookstore owner, who had dared to negotiate with the Panther of Wall Street. The contract lay on Jamal's desk, 12 pages of dense legal terms spelling out that Naomi Brooks would pretend to be madly in love with Malik Carter for 30 days, attending public appearances by his side, and in return she would receive enough money to save her bookstore and then some. Jamal slid a small velvet box across the desk, saying these were for her. Naomi opened it to find a diamond engagement ring so large it nearly blinded her. It was gaudy and overwhelming, and she muttered that it was excessive as she reluctantly slipped it onto her finger, the weight foreign and uncomfortable. Jamal smiled faintly, telling her Malik didn't do subtle. Now they needed to establish her story, how they met, how he proposed. Naomi groaned, asking if they couldn't just say they met at the charity auction and got engaged a week later. But Jamal shook his head, saying no one would believe Malik moved that fast. He handed her a folder filled with details, their backstory. They had supposedly been dating in secret for 6 months after meeting at her bookstore, and he had proposed on a private island. Naomi's eyebrows rose as she skimmed the document, calling it absurd and insisting no one would believe it. Malik entered the room, adjusting his cufflinks, and cut in smoothly that people would believe what they wanted to believe, because the media loved a good story about a ruthless tycoon tamed by love. Naomi looked up at him, and though she hated to admit it, he cut an impressive figure in his tailored suit. She asked if the board of directors would approve of him marrying a nobody from Harlem, and Malik met her gaze, telling her she underestimated herself and, besides the board, was thrilled he was showing his human side. He checked his watch and said they had their first public appearance tonight at the Walcott Foundation dinner, and asked if she was ready. Hours later, Naomi walked into the Metropolitan Museum of Art on Malik's arm, feeling like an imposter in the designer gown his stylist had picked for her. Camera flashes exploded around them as photographers shouted Malik's name. "Smile," he murmured low in her ear, his hand resting firmly at the small of her back, and Naomi whispered through gritted teeth that she felt like she was heading to an execution. "Maybe you are," Malik teased, but she forced a smile that she prayed looked real. Reporters crowded them asking if this was his mystery woman and what her name was. Before Naomi could answer, Malik pulled her closer and announced, "This is Naomi Brooks, my fiancée." The crowd erupted in excitement as flashes grew brighter. "Tell us how you met," someone shouted. Naomi froze for a split second before recalling her script and said she owned a small bookstore, and Malik had come in looking for a first edition. Malik added smoothly that he found much more than a book that day. The reporters ate it up as Malik played the role of smitten lover with startling ease. His eyes softened when he looked at her. His hand found excuses to linger on her shoulder or intertwine with her fingers, and Naomi found herself unsettled by how convincing it all felt. Inside the gala, they were greeted by Richard Montgomery, a board member, and his wife Janet, who eyed Naomi with thinly veiled curiosity, saying they had no idea Malik was even dating. Naomi smiled tightly, replying that Malik valued his privacy. Malik agreed, adding, "When you find something precious, you protect it." Throughout the evening, Malik introduced Naomi to countless business partners and society figures, all astonished that the infamous lone wolf had been hiding a relationship. On the dance floor, Malik whispered that everyone was buying it, and Naomi replied that they actually believed he was capable of love. Something flickered in his eyes as he asked if she thought he wasn't. She countered that he loved his company and control. Malik pulled her closer, asking if it was so terrible to care deeply about what he had built. Naomi admitted it wasn't, but said there should be room for more. Before he could answer, a commotion rippled across the ballroom as a striking woman entered, and whispers spread. Naomi asked who she was, and Malik's jaw tightened as he said Vanessa Sinclair, his ex and a complication they didn't need. Vanessa glided toward them, air-kissing Malik's cheek while ignoring Naomi completely. She purred that she was devastated to hear Malik was engaged after he had once told her he wasn't the marrying type. Malik's arm tightened around Naomi as he replied, "People change." Vanessa finally turned to Naomi with a condescending smile, calling her the fiancée, and asking how a small bookstore owner had managed to catch New York's most eligible bachelor. Naomi felt her competitive fire spark, and without hesitation she turned to Malik, placed her hand on his chest, and said she hadn't tried to change him. She just loved him exactly as he was, sharp edges and all. Malik's eyes widened at her words, then softened into something deeper as he covered her hand with his own, brushing his thumb across her knuckles in a gesture that felt too intimate to be fake. Excusing themselves, he led her back to the dance floor and told her she had been perfect, his voice husky in a way that sent chills down her spine. Naomi flushed, realizing something between them had shifted. For the rest of the night, Malik's touches lingered longer, and Naomi found herself laughing genuinely at his dry remarks. When photographers captured them in quiet moments, the looks they shared felt dangerously real. Later, Frank drove them back, and Malik walked her to her apartment door, claiming it was just for appearances, though no one was watching. He told her she had done well, and the board chairman had already texted his approval. Naomi murmured great, her eyes avoiding his. Malik lingered awkwardly at her door, whispered goodnight, and brushed a kiss against her cheek. As she closed the door, Naomi touched the spot where his lips had been, startled at how real it felt. While Malik poured himself a glass of whiskey in his penthouse and stared out over the city, replaying the evening, especially the moment Naomi had looked at him with adoration that had been scripted, but had felt unsettlingly real. Reminding himself it was all an act, yet unable to shake the way it had stirred something he hadn't expected. The next morning, Naomi woke to the sound of her phone buzzing endlessly with news alerts. Her and Malik's pictures from the gala splashed across every site, headlines calling them the city's new power couple. Customers began flocking to her bookstore, curious to see the woman who had supposedly tamed the Panther of Wall Street. Naomi vented to her best friend Danielle, who perched on the shop counter, flipping through a tabloid. Naomi said it was insane how just a week ago she could barely pay the electricity bill, and now people were showing up for autographs. Danielle smirked, saying fame by association had its perks, and teased that Naomi and Malik looked almost convincing. If she didn't know better, she'd swear Naomi was actually falling for him. Naomi scoffed loudly, denying it, but her cheeks flushed with warmth, insisting it was all business. Just then the bell above the door chimed, and Jamal walked in dressed sharply with his leather portfolio. Greeting Naomi formally and handing her updates to her schedule, he explained that Malik had a corporate retreat that weekend in the Berkshires, and as his fiancée, she was required to attend. Naomi's eyes widened, protesting that wasn't in the contract. Jamal countered smoothly that the contract covered public appearances as needed, and this qualified. Danielle raised an eyebrow and introduced herself as Naomi's loyal skeptic best friend. Jamal gave her an appraising glance, then allowed a rare flicker of amusement, saying he preferred to be called the executive manager of impossible expectations. Naomi blinked at the surprising banter before Jamal turned back to business, instructing her to pack for 3 days, including outdoor activities and formal dinners. The Carter jet would leave Friday at 2. Danielle whispered dramatically that Naomi would never survive going back to coach flights again. That evening, Naomi was closing the store when her phone buzzed again. A message from Malik saying dinner tonight to discuss retreat strategy. I'll pick you up at 7. Unlike before, he arrived himself standing at her door in jeans and a button-down with rolled sleeves. Naomi blinked at how different he looked dressed down, somehow younger and far too attractive. Malik's eyes scanned her modest apartment, the clutter of bookshelves, and Baldwin the cat eyeing him suspiciously. Malik murmured that her place felt exactly as he imagined, not small and cluttered as she feared, but warm and lived in. He suggested they head out, and to Naomi's surprise, he didn't take her to a 5-star hotspot, but instead to a small Italian restaurant in the village. Intimate and quiet, no cameras, no flashing lights. Malik explained the owner, Marco, was an old friend and valued privacy. Marco greeted him with warmth, hugging him tightly before turning to Naomi and calling her beautiful. Naomi blushed while Malik looked almost embarrassed. Marco brought them wine and food with fatherly pride. As they ate, Naomi teased Malik about being a regular, surprised he ate like a normal person. Malik smirked, saying she must be surprised he had friends at all. Naomi teased back, and Malik revealed he had invested in Marco's restaurant 10 years earlier when no bank would help him, calling it the best investment he ever made, not for the money but for loyalty. Naomi found herself studying him differently as their conversation drifted to books, her passion glowing as she explained how her grandmother's bookstore had inspired her, and why she opened Brooks' pages even though it wasn't profitable. Malik listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest, then said quietly, "Until I bought you." Naomi corrected him sharply, saying he didn't buy her. He rented her. There was a difference. Malik laughed unexpectedly, and the sound was so genuine it caught her off guard. He raised his glass in mock salute, calling her sharp-tongued and refreshing. As dinner progressed, Naomi began to see sides of Malik no magazine had ever captured. He was witty, dry, even thoughtful, and for a while she forgot it was supposed to be a performance. But their evening was interrupted when Vanessa appeared at the door, elegant and poisonous, feigning surprise at seeing them there. Malik's expression hardened as she insisted on joining them uninvited. Naomi felt her temper rise but kept her composure. When Vanessa mocked the idea of Malik's proposal, Naomi improvised boldly, claiming she had proposed to him in his boardroom during a meeting worth billions and dared him to refuse. Malik's eyes widened, then filled with admiration as he smoothly backed her up, adding that she had interrupted a deal and made a case he couldn't turn down. Vanessa's smile froze. Naomi leaned into Malik's arm. Malik's thumb stroked her wrist in a way that sent tingles up her arm, and Vanessa was left glaring as they left the restaurant together. Once outside, Naomi burst out laughing, saying Vanessa's face looked like it might combust. Malik laughed too, a sound Naomi realized she had never heard from him. It softened his entire face, making him look almost boyish. He shook his head, repeating her bold improvisation. "Brilliant." She curtsied playfully, thanking him. Their laughter faded into a silence that felt charged as Malik walked her to her apartment door, his tone serious now as he warned her Vanessa would be at the retreat and might try to expose them. Naomi frowned, realizing the danger this posed to his merger. Malik stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle and unnecessary with no audience around. He whispered that they would have to be very convincing. Naomi's breath caught as he leaned in slowly, giving her a chance to step away, but she didn't. His lips brushed hers in a kiss so light it felt more dangerous than any deep embrace. When he pulled back, his expression was unreadable as he murmured goodnight. Naomi closed her door with trembling hands touching her lips, shaken not by the performance but by the fear that she was beginning to forget it was just an act, while Malik sat in his car gripping the steering wheel tightly, disturbed by the truth that the kiss had served no strategy, no purpose, except the fact that he wanted to do it again. The Carter jet sliced through the clouds on Friday afternoon carrying Malik, Naomi, Jamal, and a handful of executives toward the Berkshires where the annual corporate retreat was held. Naomi sat by the window trying to look calm while inside she fought nerves. Jamal sat across from her, quizzing her on details of their fake love story, as if they were preparing for a courtroom trial. Malik worked silently on his tablet, occasionally glancing at Naomi. Every time their eyes met, she felt that dangerous pull again and quickly looked away. When they landed, Naomi was swept into a world of wealth she had never experienced. The retreat lodge was a massive estate with sweeping lawns, glass walls, and luxury cabins reserved for the senior team. Families milled about, spouses greeted each other warmly, children ran across the grass. Naomi realized with a sinking feeling she was about to be scrutinized by everyone who believed Malik Carter incapable of love. At dinner that night, the long oak table glittered with candles and silverware. Executives raised glasses to the merger with Westbrook Industries. Henry Westbrook himself sat at the head, smiling approvingly at Malik. His daughter Celeste eyed Naomi curiously, asking how she and Malik had met. Naomi repeated the bookstore story with practiced ease, adding small details to make it sound natural. Malik surprised her by chiming in with his own embellishments about the first book he bought, and how she recommended poetry. Naomi blinked at him in shock before smiling naturally at the seamless teamwork. Even Henry chuckled, saying perhaps Malik had finally discovered something beyond balance sheets. The evening was going smoothly until Vanessa made her move. She sauntered in, late draped in diamonds, and leaned casually against Malik's chair, purring that she was surprised he had brought his little fiancée. Naomi smiled sweetly and slid her hand onto Malik's as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Malik's thumb brushed hers gently beneath the table, grounding her in the moment. She replied that she was surprised Vanessa had come alone. Perhaps no one wanted to share the spotlight. Laughter rippled around the table while Vanessa's smile tightened. The next morning, Malik took Naomi on a hike up the mountain trail, away from the prying eyes of executives. The crisp air smelled of pine and earth. Naomi struggled to keep up in borrowed boots, but Malik slowed his pace. Teasing that she wasn't much of an outdoors woman, Naomi shot back that he wasn't much of a human being, but she was willing to work with what she had. Malik laughed low and warm, the kind of laugh she had begun to crave. When they reached the overlook, the valley stretched wide beneath them. Bathed in golden morning light, Malik grew quiet, confessing that sometimes he escaped here alone just to remember what silence sounded like. Naomi looked at him, startled by the honesty. She said softly that silence could be comforting, but it could also be lonely. Malik's eyes found hers, and in that stillness the line between pretense and truth blurred. He reached out, brushing her cheek with his fingers, and she didn't pull away. His lips found hers in a kiss that was no longer part of any contract, deep and certain, leaving her dizzy and breathless. When they finally pulled apart, Naomi whispered that this wasn't in the script. Malik's voice was low and rough as he answered, "Maybe we should stop following the script." That night, Naomi couldn't sleep, replaying the kiss over and over. Every time she told herself it was dangerous, she remembered the way his eyes had softened, the way his hand had held the back of her neck with such care. She buried her face in her pillow, muttering that this was supposed to be temporary. Across the lodge, Malik poured himself whiskey in his private cabin. Jamal quietly entered, warning that getting too close was reckless. Malik shot him a look, but Jamal pressed on, saying Naomi wasn't like the others. She wouldn't accept being discarded when the deal was done. Malik didn't respond, only stared out the window at the dark forest, whispering to himself that he wasn't sure he could let her go anyway. The retreat weekend unfolded like a delicate performance. Every breakfast, lunch, and fireside gathering another scene where Naomi and Malik had to play the roles of devoted lovers. Except with every touch and every look, the line between acting and reality blurred further. Executives' wives whispered about how beautiful Naomi was and how grounded she seemed. Their husbands remarked that Malik looked less severe when she was near him. Naomi caught Malik watching her when he thought no one else noticed, his gaze softer than she had ever imagined possible. But with Vanessa circling like a predator, the atmosphere grew tense. She dropped subtle comments in front of others about Malik's past, about his dislike of commitment, about the coldness he used to pride himself on. Naomi countered each barb with quiet wit, matching Malik's presence with her own strength. But the pressure weighed on her. During the Saturday evening reception, Vanessa cornered Naomi near the fireplace, her voice dripping with disdain as she whispered that Naomi was nothing but a placeholder. Malik would never give his heart because he didn't have one to give. Naomi held her head high, insisting she wasn't intimidated. Vanessa smirked, predicting Naomi would be gone before the ink on the merger was dry. Malik appeared at Naomi's side then, his arm slipping protectively around her waist, his glare silencing Vanessa as he told her coldly that she was no longer part of his life. Vanessa's eyes narrowed before she turned on her heel and left. Malik bent close to Naomi, murmuring she should ignore her. Naomi whispered back, asking if Vanessa was right, if he really wasn't capable of love. Malik looked at her for a long moment, his jaw tight, then answered quietly that once he thought that was true, but now he wasn't so sure. The next morning brought more tension as Henry Westbrook requested private time with Malik. Naomi watched Malik disappear into the lodge office with Henry, her chest tight with unease when he returned. His expression was unreadable. Naomi pressed him for answers, and he admitted Henry had asked if Naomi was genuine, or just another part of his ruthless strategy. Malik confessed he had dodged the question. Naomi's heart sank, asking if he was ashamed of the truth. Malik shook his head, saying no, but the truth was complicated. Naomi pulled away, frustrated that even after everything he couldn't admit what she was beginning to feel. Later that day, Malik found her outside near the stables brushing one of the horses. She said softly that maybe this was all a mistake. Malik took her hand, insisting he hadn't expected her to matter, but she did. Naomi's eyes burned with emotion as she whispered that she wasn't a deal to be closed. Malik cupped her face, whispering he knew. Their lips met again with desperate urgency, as if sealing a promise neither of them had spoken aloud. In that kiss, Naomi realized she was already in too deep, and Malik knew he was losing the control he had built his empire on. That evening, the retreat hosted a masquerade ball under the vaulted wooden beams of the lodge. Music swelled as guests in elegant masks danced beneath golden chandeliers. Naomi wore a flowing gown Malik's stylist had selected, her mask feathered and shimmering. Malik approached her with a rare smile, offering his hand. As they moved together across the floor, Naomi felt the world fade away. Malik's hand strong at her back, his eyes burning through the mask as if seeing only her. In that moment, she forgot every contract, every lie, every warning. She was simply a woman in love with a man who terrified and fascinated her. The spell broke when she overheard two executives whispering about the merger and speculating Naomi was nothing but a stunt to secure Westbrook's trust. The words cut deep, and Naomi's chest ached as she realized this performance could cost her heart more than her reputation. When the music ended, Malik leaned close, whispering that she was extraordinary, but Naomi forced a smile, wondering how long she could keep pretending it didn't matter. The masquerade lingered in Naomi's mind long after the music faded. She returned to her cabin, restless, replaying every glance and every touch. She told herself she couldn't keep confusing the act with reality. Yet every part of her body remembered the way Malik had looked at her, as though she were the only person in the room. The next morning she found him outside near the edge of the forest, hands shoved deep in his pockets, staring at the horizon. When she joined him, he admitted quietly that for the first time in years he felt unsure. Naomi teased that the mighty Malik Carter didn't know what to do, but her smile softened when he confessed that being near her felt like losing control in a way he didn't hate. Naomi felt her chest tighten. She whispered that maybe he should stop pretending control was all that mattered. He touched her hand, the warmth sparking through her, and before she knew it, he was pulling her close. Their kiss this time fierce and hungry. No script, no board of directors. Just two people giving in to something they could no longer deny. By afternoon, whispers spread among the retreat guests. Vanessa had been seen speaking privately with one of Henry Westbrook's advisors. Naomi felt a chill knowing Vanessa was scheming to undermine them. Malik dismissed it, saying Vanessa thrived on stirring trouble, but Naomi reminded him that the merger depended on trust, and one wrong rumor could ruin everything. Malik's jaw tightened, promising he would handle it, but Naomi feared that his usual tactics of intimidation might not work this time. Later, Vanessa confronted Naomi outright in the garden, her voice sharp as she accused Naomi of being a fraud who would never survive in Malik's world. Naomi shot back that Vanessa could keep underestimating her, but it wouldn't change the truth. Vanessa sneered, asking what truth? That Malik was suddenly capable of love. Naomi's hands trembled, but her voice was steady as she replied, "Maybe he was, and maybe she was the reason." Vanessa laughed coldly, predicting Naomi would end up heartbroken and alone. Naomi turned away, but Vanessa's words cut deeper than she wanted to admit. That night, Malik invited Naomi to his cabin under the pretense of strategy. She arrived expecting another discussion of talking points and instead found him waiting with 2 glasses of wine, the fire crackling in the hearth. His voice quieter than usual as he admitted he hadn't let anyone close since his parents' bitter divorce. Naomi sat beside him listening as he spoke of nights alone in empty penthouses, of victories that tasted hollow, of money that bought power but never peace. Naomi reached for his hand, telling him softly that he didn't have to carry it all alone. Malik's eyes burned as he whispered that she was making him want something real. Naomi's breath caught as he leaned in, their lips meeting again, but this time they didn't stop. The night unfolded in a blur of heat and tenderness as they crossed the line between pretense and truth. When the dawn light streamed through the curtains, Naomi lay in Malik's arms, torn between joy and fear. Joy because she had never felt so seen, and fear because she knew she was falling, in love with a man who might never be able to love her. Back the retreat ended with polite goodbyes and staged smiles for the press, but Naomi's heart was heavy as she boarded the jet with Malik. Danielle's voice echoed in her mind, warning her not to confuse business with pleasure. Yet as Malik sat beside her, his hand resting over hers in quiet reassurance, Naomi wondered if it was already too late. Malik stared out the window, lost in thought. The empire he had built suddenly feeling fragile because for the first time in his life, he wanted something he couldn't buy, and he was terrified that if Naomi walked away, he wouldn't know how to survive the loss. Back in New York, the glow of the retreat faded quickly as business reality came crashing in. Malik received word that the Westbrook merger was on shaky ground, with rumors swirling that his engagement was nothing more than a publicity stunt. The board demanded reassurance, and Henry Westbrook himself requested proof that Malik's relationship with Naomi was authentic. Malik stalked through his office like a caged panther, snapping at Jamal to track every rumor. Jamal quietly suggested that Vanessa's hand was behind it, but Malik already knew. Naomi arrived at the office that evening, only to find Malik pacing with a storm in his eyes. He told her bluntly that they needed to escalate a wedding before the merger was finalized. Naomi froze, demanding to know if he was asking because he wanted her or because he needed her. Malik didn't answer fast enough, and the silence cut deeper than any words. Naomi whispered that she couldn't marry a man who saw her as a strategy. She turned and walked out, leaving Malik standing speechless in his own tower of glass. Naomi found refuge at the bookstore, her heart aching as she sat among the shelves that had always felt like home. Danielle arrived with takeout, urging her to talk. Naomi confessed that she was terrified because what had started as pretend had become real for her, and she didn't know if Malik could ever truly see her beyond the deal. Danielle reminded her that Malik wasn't the type to open up easily, but Naomi countered that love wasn't about contracts or conditions. It was about choice, and if Malik couldn't choose her without the merger, then she couldn't stay. Tears burned her eyes as she admitted she wanted him anyway. Meanwhile, Malik sat alone in his penthouse, staring out at the glittering skyline. For the first time in his career, he couldn't find a solution. Every instinct screamed at him to protect the merger, but his heart, that stubborn thing he had denied for years, whispered that Naomi was more than any business deal. Jamal entered quietly, telling him he had never seen Malik like this. Malik muttered that maybe that was the problem. Jamal told him sometimes power wasn't about control, but about vulnerability. Malik poured whiskey into a glass and admitted softly that vulnerability was the one thing he had spent his life avoiding. Jamal gave him a long look before leaving, knowing this was a battle only Malik could fight. The next day, Naomi stood in the store helping a child choose a book when the doorbell chimed, and Malik walked in wearing no suit, no armor, just a man stripped bare of his usual confidence. Naomi's breath caught as she whispered, "What are you doing here?" Malik's voice was rough as he said he didn't come to negotiate. He came to ask for a chance. Naomi folded her arms, insisting she wasn't a business problem to solve. Malik stepped closer, admitting that the merger might collapse and his empire might suffer, but none of it mattered if he lost her. Naomi's eyes filled with tears because she wanted to believe him, but part of her feared this was just another tactic. Malik reached for her hand, pleading for her to trust him. Naomi pulled back, whispering she needed time. Malik nodded slowly, though the pain in his eyes betrayed how badly he wanted her to stay. He left the bookstore, and for the first time in his life, Malik Carter didn't know if he would win. The pressure around the merger reached its peak as reporters swarmed Carter Global headquarters demanding answers. Henry Westbrook called a private meeting with Malik, insisting he wanted to hear the truth about Naomi before he put his company's future on the line. Malik stood in that boardroom filled with Westbrook executives and his own directors. The air thick with tension, Henry asked him plainly if his engagement was genuine or a charade. Malik could feel every eye on him, the calculating stares of men who measured everything in profit. And for the first time he didn't care. He said the truth was that it had started as a deal. He had offered Naomi money to play a role because he thought appearances could save a merger. But then his voice cracked as he admitted somewhere along the way it stopped being pretend. He had fallen in love with her, completely and irrevocably, and if that cost him the merger, then so be it. Stunned silence filled the room as Malik's confession hung in the air. Henry Westbrook studied him for a long moment, then said softly that love was the only foundation strong enough for partnership. And if Malik had found that, then maybe the merger could survive too. He told Malik to prove it not with contracts but with courage. That evening, Malik called Naomi, asking her to meet him at the Brooklyn Botanical Garden, where strings of lights glowed among the trees. Naomi arrived cautiously, her heart racing. Malik stood waiting in the center of the path, dressed simply. No boardroom armor, just a man stripped down to the truth. He looked at her with eyes full of vulnerability and said he had told everyone everything. The lie, the truth, the whole messy story. Because she deserved more than shadows and half measures. Naomi's breath caught as she whispered, "Why?" Malik stepped closer, his voice breaking as he said, "Because I love you, Naomi Brooks. I love the way you challenge me, the way you see the man beneath the headlines. I love you in ways I didn't know I was capable of, and I don't want a merger or a deal. I want you." Then he dropped to one knee, pulling a ring box from his pocket. Not the gaudy diamond Jamal had given her, but a simple, elegant ring he had chosen himself. He held it out with shaking hands, saying, "Marry me not for appearances, not for business, but because I can't imagine my life without you." Naomi's eyes filled with tears, her heart pounding with every word. She thought of the bookstore, the nights they had shared, the kisses that had stolen her breath. She realized she was already his in every way that mattered. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Yes. Yes, Malik, I'll marry you." The crowd that had quietly gathered around them burst into applause as Malik slipped the ring on her finger and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the passion and certainty of a man who had finally surrendered to love. Naomi clung to him, knowing this was no longer a script or an arrangement. It was real. It was forever. Malik whispered against her lips that she had saved him, and Naomi whispered back that he had saved her too. The city lights shimmered in the distance, but all they saw was each other. A year later, the little bookstore in Harlem was no longer just surviving. It was thriving. Brooks' Pages had expanded into the empty space next door with shelves filled with new titles and a children's corner designed for weekend readings. Community members streamed in not only to buy books but to be part of the space Naomi had built. She walked through the aisles greeting customers, her hand resting on her small baby bump. The bell above the door chimed and Malik stepped inside wearing a simple navy sweater instead of a suit. He kissed her softly on the cheek before bending to rub Baldwin the cat's head. Naomi teased that the Panther of Wall Street had finally learned to relax. Malik smirked, saying maybe the Panther had retired. Maybe he was just a husband and soon a father. Naomi laughed, shaking her head, reminding him he was still running a billion-dollar company. But Malik told her that Carter Global had changed. He had restructured it to invest in communities, schools, and small businesses. Because she had shown him money wasn't just power. It could be purpose. That evening, they gathered at Marco's restaurant surrounded by family and friends. Candles flickered on the tables, laughter filled the air. Marco himself served Naomi her favorite pasta and winked, saying Malik had promised to name their next child after him. Naomi laughed and Malik raised his glass, announcing a toast to love that comes when you least expect it, and to building something real. Everyone cheered as Naomi leaned into his side, her head against his chest. Remembering the first night they had argued over spilled food and how impossible he had seemed. Now he was hers, not as a contract, not as a billionaire, but as her partner, her husband, her forever. Later, when they returned home, Malik carried Naomi across the threshold of their brownstone apartment in Harlem, where city lights glowed outside the window. He set her down gently and kissed her slowly, his voice low as he whispered, "Thank you for saying yes." Naomi smiled, whispering, "Always." Malik looked at her with eyes full of a love that was no longer hidden, no longer restrained, and in that moment they both knew this was the life they had chosen, not bought, not bargained, but earned together forever.